She fled pregnant from a man she vowed never to see again. But now only he can save her, and the children he never knew he had. The Man She Hated is a story about love, betrayal, and secrets that time couldn't erase. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this tale. If you enjoy love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The smell of strong coffee and sugar-glazed donuts hung in the air at the corner bakery when Emily Carter realized that her 7-year life was about to crumble again. It was a Tuesday morning in Portland, and she had chosen that coastal city precisely for this. The mornings always seemed the same, predictable, safe, the kind of routine that a woman on the run learns to value like gold. She held Serena's small hand while Lucas walked half a step ahead, as he always did. The twins were 6 years old and carried in their golden eyes a maturity that shouldn't exist at that age. Lucas observed every movement around them with the precision of a detective, while Serena maintained the attentive silence that Emily had taught them since they learned to speak. "Mom, that man at the corner table has been watching us for a long time," murmured Lucas, pretending to tie his shoelace. Emily felt her blood freeze. She didn't turn her head, didn't change her expression. She only gently squeezed the children's shoulders, the agreed signal that meant, "We're changing direction." She paid for the French bread and chocolate truffles that Serena had chosen, smiled at the attendant as she always did, and walked out the main door keeping a normal pace. 3 blocks later, when she could no longer feel the eyes on her back, Emily finally breathed. But the relief was short-lived. On the way home, she noticed the silver Corolla that followed them for 2 blocks before turning onto a parallel street. It could have been a coincidence. 7 years of paranoia teach you to see threats where none exist, but they also teach you not to ignore the signs. The house where they lived was in a middle-class neighborhood, away from downtown, where she could be just another woman raising 2 children alone. She had rented it under the name of Marianne Smith, widow, retired librarian who worked restoring old books. The identity was perfect because it was partially true. Emily really did understand books, old papers, preservation. Before her life fell apart, she was a forensic expert with the FBI, specializing in document analysis. She knew how things deteriorated with time. She knew how to preserve what mattered, and she knew how to destroy evidence when necessary. "Kids, go to your room and play for a while. Mommy needs to work," she said as soon as they entered. Lucas looked at her with that gaze she knew well, the same look she saw in the mirror when she allowed herself to observe her own reflection for more than a few seconds. It was the look of someone who knew things weren't right, but was too intelligent to ask questions they shouldn't ask. "Is everything okay, Mom?" asked Serena, the more sensitive of the two, the one who cried when she saw injured birds, and who hugged Emily every night before sleeping, as if she could feel the weight she carried. "Everything's fine, my love. I just need to finish some work things." A lie. Emily had been lying to her children since they were born, lied about the father they never knew, about why they moved towns constantly, about why they couldn't talk to strangers, about why they couldn't have real friends. She lied because the truth could kill them. When the children closed themselves in their room, Emily went to the kitchen window and observed the street. Everything normal, some children playing on the sidewalk, the neighbor watering her plants, the mail carrier on his usual round. But something was different, a tension in the air that she couldn't explain, as if the world had changed frequency and she was the only one who noticed. That's when she saw the envelope. It was under the door, as if someone had silently slid it while she was out. Common paper. No sender, no identification. Emily picked it up with trembling hands. Inside, a single photograph, herself, leaving the bakery that morning, with Lucas and Serena beside her. The world stopped. 7 years. 7 years changing names, towns, lives. 7 years teaching the children to be invisible. 7 years believing she had managed to disappear forever, and someone had found her. Emily ran to the children's room. They were on the floor assembling a puzzle she had bought the week before, a map of the United States, because Lucas was obsessed with geography, and Serena liked to imagine all the places where they could live someday. "Kids, pack your bags, quick." "Again, Mum?" asked Lucas, but he was already getting up. They had moved so many times that they knew the routine by heart. Take only the essentials, nothing that would identify them, nothing that would leave traces. It's just for a few days. A trip. Emily tried to smile, but her voice came out choked. Serena observed her with those big, golden eyes, the eyes of the father she never knew, the man Emily had been trying to forget for 7 years, and whom she saw reflected in her children's faces every day. "Mommy's afraid," said Serena, not as a question, but as a statement. Emily knelt in front of her, held her small face between her hands. "Sometimes people get scared, my love, but what matters is what we do when we're scared, and we're going to stay together, always." 10 minutes later, they were on the street with 2 backpacks and the feeling that someone was watching them from somewhere. Emily had burned all the fake documents, washed the fingerprints off everything she might have touched, erased any trace of Marianne Smith. It was a routine she mastered, unfortunately. They took 3 different buses, got off at random stops, walked through streets that Emily had memorized in the first days in the city. Always having escape routes was a basic rule of survival. By late afternoon, they were in a cheap hotel downtown, registered under names she made up on the spot. But that night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat in the room's only chair, watching Lucas and Serena sleep on the twin bed, hugging each other as they always did when they felt something was wrong. They were so small, so innocent, and already carrying the weight of a life they didn't choose. That's when her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. No text, just a video. Emily pressed play and felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. It was the warehouse where she worked, or rather, where she had worked until that morning. In flames, the fire consuming everything, the old books she restored, the work tools, the table where she spent afternoons trying to restore beauty to things that time had deteriorated. The message was clear. They knew where she lived, where she worked, what she called herself. And they weren't in a hurry. They were playing with her, like a cat plays with a mouse before killing it. Emily turned off the phone and looked at her children. Lucas was mumbling something in his sleep, probably solving some math problem he had seen at school. Serena clutched the small teddy bear she took everywhere, the only constant in their nomadic lives. For the first time in 7 years, Emily admitted to herself she couldn't protect them alone. The next day, while the children were having breakfast in the hotel restaurant, she went out to buy new clothes and a prepaid phone. But upon returning, she found the receptionist with a strange expression. "Did you leave someone watching the children?" he asked. Emily's blood froze. "Why?" "A young woman came to pick them up. Said she was the nanny that you had asked. Blonde, well-dressed. The children seemed to know her." Emily didn't wait for the elevator. She ran up the 3 flights of stairs, her heart beating so hard it seemed like it would burst out of her mouth. She opened the door to the room and found the children alone, watching cartoons on television, as if nothing had happened. "Who was the woman who came here?" she asked, trying to control her voice. "What woman?" Lucas frowned. "The man at reception said a woman came to get you." "Nobody came here, Mum," said Serena. "We just watched TV." Emily looked around. Everything was exactly as she had left it, but something was different. It took her a few seconds to notice what... On the bedside table was a paper that wasn't there before, a simple sheet with a single sentence written by hand. "We know about David. The world collapsed. David Nichols. The name she hadn't spoken in 7 years. The man she loved and who destroyed her. The father of children who never knew he had children. The man who disappeared the same night Emily's life turned to ashes. They knew about David." Emily sat on the bed, her legs trembling. The children looked at her with concern, but she could barely breathe. Because if they knew about David, they knew everything. They knew about Operation Eros, about the accusations, about the escape. They knew that the children were the offspring of the most dangerous man she had ever known. And that meant that it wasn't just Emily who was in danger. It was the entire family they had never been able to form. That night, after Lucas and Serena finally fell asleep, Emily made the decision she swore she would never make. She took the prepaid phone and dialed a number she had memorized but never used. A number that led to a man she hated, loved, and feared in equal proportions. The phone rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, a voice she would recognize anywhere answered. "I was expecting your call," said David Nichols, as if he knew this day would come. Emily closed her eyes and pronounced the words that changed everything. They found us, and they know about the children. On the other end of the line, a silence that lasted an eternity. Then David's voice, lower, more dangerous. "Where are you?" And Emily, for the first time in 7 years, told the truth about where she was. Because she had no more choices, because the children he never knew needed the father they never had. Because some wars cannot be won alone, even if it meant returning to the arms of the man who had broken her heart into 1,000 pieces. David Nichols arrived like a silent storm in the early hours of Portland. Emily didn't see him arrive. One moment the hotel corridor was empty. The next, he was standing in front of the room door, as if he had materialized from the shadows. She opened the door before he even knocked. 7 years hadn't been enough for her to stop recognizing his presence, that disturbing energy he carried like a second skin. David was different, taller, or maybe it was his more rigid posture. The dark hair cut very short, some marks on his face that weren't there before, a thin scar that cut across his left eyebrow, another that descended from the corner of his mouth to his jaw. The eyes remained the same, golden like wild honey, cold as ice. The same eyes she saw every day in her children's faces. They stared at each other in silence for long seconds. Emily had imagined this moment hundreds of times over the years, what she would say, how she would feel, if she could maintain her composure. But now, with him there in front of her, she discovered there was no possible preparation for the impact of seeing David Nichols again. "You've changed," was the first thing he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. 7 years tend to do that to people. Not all people disappear for 7 years. Emily felt the old anger rise in her throat. Not all people are abandoned while pregnant after being framed for something they didn't do. David closed his eyes for a second, as if the words were a punch to the stomach. When he opened them again, there was something different in them, something that looked like pain. "Where are they?" It wasn't a question. It was almost a plea. Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to hurt him, make him pay for all the years of loneliness, for all the nights she had to explain to 2 children why they didn't have a father like the others. But another part, a part she had been trying to silence for 7 years, just wanted him to come in, take Lucas and Serena in his arms and protect them from all the evil in the world. "They're sleeping." David walked past her without asking permission, and Emily smelled the scent she had tried to forget, a mixture of leather, neutral soap, and something indefinable that was purely his. She saw him stop in front of the bed where the children slept, saw his shoulders tense, saw his hands close into fists at his sides. Lucas had his protective arm around his sister, even while sleeping. Serena clutched the teddy bear against her chest. Her brown hair spread across the pillow. They were beautiful. They were perfect. And they were unquestionably David Nichols' children. "Jesus Christ," he murmured, his voice almost inaudible. "No," said Emily, quietly closing the door. "They're Lucas and Serena." David turned to her so quickly that Emily instinctively took a step back. The look he gave her was a mixture of fury, pain, and something she couldn't identify. 7 years, he said, each word loaded with accusation. 7 years, Emily, and you never told me. "Tell you." Her voice rose a few tones and she forced herself to lower it so as not to wake the children. "Tell you how. You disappeared, David. On the day my life turned into hell, you simply vanished. Not even a note. Not even an explanation. Nothing. You don't understand." "No, you don't understand." Emily was trembling with anger. "I found out I was pregnant the same day I discovered I had been framed, the same day you disappeared like a ghost. What do you think I was going to do? Put an ad in the newspaper looking for the father of my children. Send a letter to the man who left me to face the biggest crisis of my life alone." David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered well. "I had to leave. There was no choice." "There's always a choice, David, and you chose to abandon me. I chose to protect you." The phrase came out like a contained scream, loaded with a pain he seemed to have been holding for years. The children stirred in the bed, and both stood still until they were sure they were still sleeping. "Protect me," Emily whispered, her voice venomous. "Is that how you protected me? Leaving me alone to face the accusations, leaving me to flee pregnant with twins, leaving me to raise our children in hiding, always looking over my shoulder, always afraid. David moved closer to her, and Emily could see that his eyes were shining with a dangerous intensity. You don't know anything, Emily. You don't know the shit we were into. You don't know what happened after you fled. Then tell me. Operation Eros wasn't just about political corruption. It was about something much bigger. A network that involved international intelligence, information trafficking, commissioned assassinations. And you were at the center of it all, even without knowing. Emily felt the ground sway beneath her feet. What are you talking about? The evidence you were accused of forging, it was real. But someone within the task force itself was selling information to those under investigation. When they discovered you were getting too close to the truth, they decided to eliminate you. The framing was just the first step. And you knew this. I found out at the last minute. That's why I disappeared, to take the focus off you, so they would believe I was the leak, not you. Emily stared at him, trying to process the information. You took the blame? I took the blame for something I didn't do to save the woman I loved, and when I came back to get you, you had disappeared. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with 7 years of misunderstandings and pain. Emily sat in the room's only chair, her legs trembling. Everything she had believed, everything that had sustained her during these years, the certainty that David had betrayed her, was crumbling. "Why didn't you look for me before?" she asked, her voice broken. "I did. For 2 years, I turned the country upside down looking for you, but you had disappeared like only someone from our field would know how to do. And when I finally accepted that you didn't want to be found, I focused on dismantling the network completely." "Did you succeed?" David smiled, but there was no joy in the smile. "I managed to destroy the original structure, but these things are like hydras. You cut off one head, 2 grow in its place. The organization reformed, got smarter, more dangerous, and it seems now they want to settle old scores." It was then that Serena moved in the bed, mumbled something and opened her eyes. She saw her mother sitting in the chair and sat up, rubbing her eyes with the backs of her hands. "Mommy," she said, her voice hoarse with sleep. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Only then did she notice David. She stopped rubbing her eyes and stared at him with curiosity, without fear. Emily felt her heart speed up. "Who are you?" asked Serena, with the naturalness of a 6-year-old. David remained motionless for a moment, as if he didn't know what to say. Then, slowly, he knelt to be at her height. "I'm a friend of your mother's," he said, his voice softer than Emily had heard in years. Serena studied him for a few seconds. "You have the same eyes as me and Lucas." Emily swallowed hard. David blinked a few times, as if trying to compose himself. "Yes, that's true," he said. "Serena, go back to sleep, sweetie," interrupted Emily. "We'll talk tomorrow." But Lucas had woken up with the voices. He sat up in bed and observed the scene with that disturbing intelligence he had always shown. His gaze went from Emily to David, then back to Emily. "Mum," he said, his voice too serious for a child, "is this my father?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. David remained kneeling, his eyes fixed on the boy who was a miniature version of himself. "Yes," David finally said, "I'm your father." Serena jumped out of bed and ran to him, hugging him with the spontaneity of a child who had always dreamed of this moment. David picked her up, his eyes filling with tears he tried to contain. Lucas was more cautious. He got out of bed and approached slowly, studying David as he studied everything in life. "Why did you never come to see us before?" he asked. Emily saw David close his eyes, as if the question were a blade. "Because I didn't know you existed," he said, looking directly at his son. "But now that I know, I'll never leave again. Promise?" "I promise." Lucas nodded, as if evaluating the sincerity of the response. Then he extended his hand to David, a formal, adult handshake. "Nice to meet you, Dad." David shook his son's small hand, and Emily saw his mask of coldness crumble completely. He pulled Lucas into a hug, and there, with both children in his arms, he seemed more human than she had ever seen him. But the moment was interrupted by David's cell phone. He answered with one hand, still holding the children with the other. Talk, he said, his voice returning to its professional tone. Emily saw his expression change as he listened. The muscles in his jaw contracted, his eyes hardened. How much time? He asked. Pause. Right. Keep your distance and inform me of any movement. He hung up and looked at Emily. We have to leave. Now, what happened? 2 cars with 4 men each just arrived at the hotel. They're not guests. Emily felt panic rise in her throat. How did they... It doesn't matter how. What matters is that they're here. David stood up, putting the children on the floor. Lucas and Serena, do you know how to pack quickly? We do, said Lucas. We've done it many times. The sadness that passed across David's face when he heard this broke Emily's heart, but he quickly composed himself. Then do it. Just the essentials. We have 3 minutes. While the children gathered their few belongings, David approached Emily. Is there an emergency exit on this floor? Fire escape at the end of the corridor. Perfect. My car is parked on the back street. David! Emily held his arm when he turned. Thank you. He looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. Don't thank me yet. This is just beginning. 2 minutes later, they were descending the fire escape like a family fleeing a burning building. But it wasn't fire that was pursuing them. It was something much more dangerous. When they reached David's car, a black SUV with dark windows, he paused before starting the engine. Emily, he said, turning to her. Before we go, I need you to know something. What? Everything that's going to happen from now on. It's going to be dangerous, very dangerous. If you want, I can put you and the children in safety and deal with this alone. Emily looked at the children in the back seat, then back at David. We're in this together. For the first time in 7 years, we're together. And I won't let them separate us again. David nodded and started the engine. As they drove away in the early hours of Portland, Emily looked in the rearview mirror and saw the men coming out through the hotel's main entrance. They had missed the family by a few minutes. Where are we going? Asked Serena from the back seat. To a safe place, answered David. Does such a place exist? Asked Lucas, always the more skeptical. David looked at him through the rearview mirror. We'll create one, son. And for the first time in 7 years, Emily believed that maybe it was possible. With David by her side, with the family finally reunited, perhaps they could face anything. But deep in her heart, she knew that the hardest part was still to come. While driving through the early morning, following roads that only he knew, David explained his plan. They had a safe house in the Colorado mountains, isolated, fortified, where they could regroup and plan their next move. But first, they needed to discover how they had been found. Someone is passing information, he said, and this person knows you well enough to predict your movements. Emily thought of all the people who had helped her over the years, the retired judge who had falsified her first documents, the woman in Raleigh who taught her how to change her appearance, the merchant in Denver who sold fake IDs. It could be anyone, she murmured. No, said David, his eyes fixed on the dark road. It has to be someone very close, someone you trust. And that's when Emily remembered. A week before, she had called Judge Sanders for advice about the children. He had insisted on knowing where they were, said he was worried, that he wanted to help. The man who had saved her life 7 years ago could be the one trying to destroy it now. David, she said, her voice trembling. I think I know who it is. David's safe house was hidden among the pine trees of the Colorado mountains, 3 hours of winding road from Portland. The location had been strategically chosen, isolated enough to ensure privacy, but close enough to civilization to have quick access to resources when necessary. The main house, built in the 19th century, had been modernized with all the security and communication technology that a clandestine operation needed. Emily watched Lucas and Serena playing in the inner courtyard, protected by high walls and constant surveillance, while David coordinated his team in the operations room. It had been 3 days since the confrontation on the mountain, and they had used every minute to plan the final counterattack. Mom, Lucas approached, with the serious expression she knew well. Can I talk to you? Emily knelt to be at his height. Of course, my love. What is it? I remember the codes, he said, his voice low. The man was right. I know the numbers. Emily's heart stopped. What numbers? Lucas, when we lived in Seattle, you restored those old books for Mr. Mitchell. Remember? Some had numbers written in the margins. Long sequences. I memorized all of them. Emily remembered Mitchell Torres, a private collector who paid her well to restore rare works. She never questioned the origin of the books, just did her job. But now, how many numbers do you remember? All of them, said Lucas, just like that. So there are 17 different sequences, each one with 24 digits. Emily closed her eyes. Her son had memorized access codes that could be worth billions. Without knowing, she had exposed Lucas to information that men would kill to obtain. Did you tell your father? No, I wanted to talk to you first. Emily hugged her son, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Let's tell him together. Okay. When they entered the operations room, David was bent over a map of Richmond, discussing strategies with his team. There were 5 people besides him, 3 men and 2 women, all with the same air of professionals trained for extreme situations. David, called Emily, we need to talk. He raised his eyes, noticed the tense expression on her face, and dismissed the team with a gesture. What happened? Lucas remembers the codes, said Emily directly. All of them. David remained motionless for a few seconds, processing the information. Then he knelt in front of his son. Lucas, this is very important. Are you sure you remember? I am. Want me to recite one? Not here. This information is very dangerous, but I need you to understand something. These numbers you memorized can help a lot of people. They can put criminals in jail and return stolen money to those who need it. Like Robin Hood, asked Lucas, his eyes shining. Exactly like Robin Hood. Then I want to help. David looked at Emily. It was a decision that only they, as parents, could make. Using the information in Lucas's mind meant putting him at risk, but it also meant ending the threat once and for all. If we do this, said Emily, it has to be done in the safest way possible. I agree, and I have a plan. David's plan was audacious and risky. They would lure Judge Sanders and the organization to a controlled location where Lucas could transmit the codes directly to federal authorities, clearing Emily's name in the process and dismantling the entire criminal network at once. The problem, he explained, is that Sanders won't come alone. He'll bring everything he has. How many men? Asked Emily. At least 20, maybe more. And we have 8, counting me and you. Me? Emily was surprised. David, I haven't fought in 7 years. No, he said, approaching her. But you never stopped being Emily Carter, the best forensic expert the FBI ever had, and now you're also a mother. That makes you 10 times more dangerous. The way he said it, the genuine admiration in his voice, made Emily remember who she was before everything fell apart, before the fear, before the escape. She had been strong, competent, or feared by the criminals she investigated. All right, she said. I'll fight. The meeting was scheduled for the next day, at the old Richmond Stock Exchange building, a location with symbolic significance, since it was there that much of the money had originally been stolen. The building had been abandoned for years, perfect for the final confrontation. That night, after Lucas and Serena fell asleep, Emily and David were alone on the farmhouse veranda, watching the stars in the clear Colorado sky. The tension of the last few days, mixed with the forced proximity and the repressed feelings of 7 years, had created an electric atmosphere between them. Are you afraid? Asked David, breaking the silence. I am, admitted Emily, but not of dying. I'm afraid of leaving the children orphans. That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. David turned to her, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. So I can promise that I'll give my life to protect you, all of you. I know, and that's what scares me. Emily stood up to go inside, but David held her hand. The electric current that had always existed between them returned with full force. Emily, he said, his voice hoarse, if tomorrow goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I need you to know. Not a single day has passed in the last 7 years without me thinking of you, without me hating myself for letting you go. Emily felt tears burn her eyes. David, I love you, he said, simple and direct. I always have, even when I thought you had betrayed me. Even when I thought I would never see you again. I love you. Emily didn't respond with words. She kissed him with all the passion, anger, longing, and desire she had kept for 7 years. It was a hungry, desperate kiss, as if they wanted to recover all the lost time in that single moment. David gently pushed her against the veranda wall, his hands moving up her face, getting lost in the brown hair that now reached her shoulders. Emily tasted him, smelled his skin, felt the texture of his stubble scratching her face. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. Never stopped. Not for a second. They made love right there, on the veranda, under the Colorado stars, like two teenagers who can't wait another minute. It was urgent, passionate, loaded with 7 years of longing and the possibility that it might be the last time. David's hands explored every curve of Emily's body as if he wanted to memorize them, while she lost herself in the sensation of finally feeling complete again. Afterward, they lay embraced on the cold veranda floor, covered only by David's shirt, watching the stars and making plans for a future that might never come. "When this is over," said David, "we'll live like a real family. We'll buy a house with a garden for the children to play. I'll teach Lucas to play baseball and take Serena fishing." "You know how to fish?" "No, but I'll learn." Emily laughed softly. "And I'll cook. For real. Not just instant noodles and sandwiches." "You know how to cook?" "No, but I'll learn too." They fell asleep there, embraced, like two lovers who haven't seen each other in years. And for the first time in a long time, Emily slept without nightmares. Dawn came too soon. The operation began at noon. David and his team positioned themselves in the old stock exchange building, each at a strategic point. Emily stayed with Lucas in a room on the 3rd floor, equipped with all the technology necessary to transmit the codes directly to the FBI and federal police simultaneously. Serena was safe at the farmhouse, protected by 2 men from David's team. It had been the most difficult decision, separating her from her brother, but it was the only way to ensure that at least one of the children would be safe. "Mommy," said Lucas, testing the microphone that would transmit his voice to the authorities, "what if I forget a number?" "You won't forget," said Emily with conviction. "You have the most brilliant mind I know." At 2:30 p.m., they arrived, first 2 cars, then 3 more, until the street in front of the building was full of black vehicles with dark windows. Emily counted at least 20 men getting out of the cars, all armed, all with the coordinated movement of professionals. And in the center of them, smiling as if it were a walk in the park, was Judge Sanders. "Emily," he shouted, his voice echoing in the empty street, "I know you're in there. Let's make things easy for everyone. Send the boy down, and this ends here." Emily's response came through the loudspeaker that David had installed in the building. "Go to hell, Sanders." The judge's laughter echoed through the street. "Always had a dirty mouth, Emily. It's one of the things I liked about you." It was then that Lucas did something that surprised everyone. He took the microphone from Emily's hands and spoke directly to the judge. "Mr. Sanders," he said, his clear, childish voice echoing through the street. "You want the codes? I'll give them all to you, but not to you. I'll give them to those who can use them to arrest people like you." And he began to recite sequences of 24 digits, spoken with the precision of a machine, but with the sweet voice of a 6-year-old child. Codes that opened bank accounts in tax havens, revealed illegal transactions worth billions of dollars, exposed a corruption network that went from North America to Europe. With each sequence recited by Lucas, Emily saw Sanders grow paler, more desperate. "Stop him," shouted the judge to his men. "Invade that building and stop that kid." The battle began. David and his team were prepared. Each entrance to the building had been fortified, each corridor transformed into a trap. But Sanders had more men, and they fought with the desperation of those who know they're losing everything. The shooting lasted 40 minutes. Emily protected Lucas with her own body while he continued reciting codes, his childish voice grotesquely contrasting with the sound of bullets and explosions coming from the floors below. "Sophie 13th sequence," Lucas said calmly, while Emily prayed that David was alive. 74921. That's when Sanders managed to reach the 3rd floor. Emily heard footsteps in the corridor, instinctively knew they weren't David's or his team's. She took the gun David had given her and positioned herself in front of Lucas. The door exploded. Sanders entered with 2 men, his face dirty with blood, the eyes of a cornered animal. "It's over, Emily," he said. The gun pointed at her. The kid's coming with me. No, you have no choice. My men killed your boyfriend downstairs. You're alone. Emily felt the world collapse. David dead. No, it couldn't be true. You're lying, she said, but her voice trembled. Want to bet your son's life on it? That's when Lucas finished reciting the last code and stood up calmly. Done, he said, addressing the microphone one last time. As those were all 17 codes, now you can arrest all the criminals. Sanders roared with rage and advanced toward the boy. Emily fired. She didn't think, didn't hesitate, just pulled the trigger. The bullet hit Sanders in the shoulder, making him stagger, but he didn't fall. The two men with him pointed their guns at Emily. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. The bullets never came. David appeared in the doorway like an avenging demon, wounded, bleeding, but alive. He killed the two men before they could react, then turned to Judge Sanders, who was on the floor, moaning in pain. Emily, said David, running to her. Are you okay? Is Lucas okay? We are, she said, throwing herself into his arms. I thought you were dead. Hard to kill me, he said, smiling despite the pain. I learned from the best. Sanders was still alive, trying to reach a gun that had fallen near him. David kicked the gun away and knelt beside the man who had tormented their lives for so long. It's over, said David. Your organization has been dismantled. Your accounts have been blocked. Your men are dead or arrested. You lost. Sanders laughed, even with blood running from his mouth. You think I was the boss? I was just a pawn. There are much more powerful people behind all this. Maybe, said David, but you'll never threaten my family again. And with a quick, precise movement, he broke Sanders' neck. Emily should have felt horror, should have been shocked by David's coldness. Instead, she felt only relief. The man who had tormented their lives for 7 years was dead. It was over. 2 hours later, the building was full of federal agents, forensic experts, and journalists. Emily gave her version of the events for the first time in 7 years, officially clearing her name. Lucas is treated as a hero, had provided information that would result in the arrest of more than 100 criminals in 12 countries. It's the largest operation against organized crime in the history of the United States, said the federal agent in charge of the operation, and all thanks to the courage of a family. That night, back at the farmhouse, Emily put Lucas and Serena to bed in the same room for the first time since they had arrived. They were safe, finally, truly safe. Mommy, said Serena, already sleepy. Now are we going to live in a real house, with Daddy? We are, my love, in a real house and with a garden and everything. And we won't run anymore. Never again. When the children fell asleep, Emily found David on the veranda, looking at the stars. He had his arm in a sling. He had taken 2 bullets, but nothing serious. What are you thinking about? She asked, cuddling up next to him. About how stupid I was to let you go 7 years ago. About how I almost lost the chance to know my children. About how I almost lost you again. You didn't lose me. I'm here. We're all here. Forever. Emily looked at the man she had loved, lost and regained. She saw the new scars, but also saw the love in his eyes. She saw the father he had become in just a few days, saw the man who would give his life for her and the children. Forever, she promised. David kissed her under the Colorado stars, and this time there was no urgency, no desperation. It was a kiss of promise, of future, of a family that had finally found its way back home. 6 months later, Emily was in the kitchen of the new house, a real house, with a garden and a white fence, on a quiet street in Richmond, trying to make pancakes without burning them. She still hadn't learned to cook properly, but she was trying. Mom, it's burning again, said Lucas, entering the kitchen with a mischievous smile. I know, sighed Emily. Where's your dad? In the garden, teaching Serena how to plant flowers. Emily looked out the window and saw David kneeling in the dirt, getting his hands dirty while showing Serena how to make a hole for the rose seedlings. It was a domestic and normal, beautiful scene. You know what, Lucas? She said, turning off the stove. How about we order pizza? Can I choose the flavors? You can. Then I want a complete family pizza, said Lucas, with that strange wisdom he sometimes showed. With everything we like, Emily hugged her son, feeling her heart overflow with gratitude. Complete family. That's exactly what they had now. When David and Serena came in, dirty with soil and laughing at some private joke, Emily knew it had been worth it. All the years of running, all the fear, all the pain, it had been worth it to get here, to get to them. "Pizza?" asked David, seeing the guilty expression on her face. "The pancakes burned," admitted Emily. "Good thing," he said, kissing her on the cheek, "because I brought hamburgers." And there, in the kitchen of the first house they could really call home, the Nichols-Carter family gathered for dinner, not as fugitives, not as survivors, but as a normal family, with discussions about what to watch on TV and plans for the weekend. Emily looked around the table. David cutting Serena's hamburger, Lucas explaining some mathematical theory to whoever wanted to listen, the dog they had adopted the week before sleeping in the corner of the living room, and smiled. Some love stories need 7 years to find their happy ending, but when they finally find it, they're worth every second of waiting.